information supplied on this program does not consider your personal circumstances and is general advice only. You should not act on any recommendation without considering your personal needs, circumstances and objectives. Retire Invest recommends you obtain professional financial advice specific to your circumstances. Jeff English is an authorised representative of RI Advice Group Proprietary Limited.
21 to 2 as Jeff English tries to explain to us all why international events and disasters affect the stock market.
Why is it so?
Why is it so? Now, Steve just mentioned before that the American stock market went up yesterday because it was found that the damage from Cyclone Irma may not have been as great as what they first expected.
Yes.
Why would something like that affect the share market?
Well, the market had been down on the back of estimates of damage. So Irma and Harvey, estimate of about 290, 280 billion in damages. So obviously a little bit early for any of those things to be reliable, but if it was estimated to be 500 billion, then the markets have actually recovered somewhat on that better news. I was going to say good news, but better news.
Is it because of a natural disaster affecting business that plays a big part in what happens?
They normally talk about the repair bill, you know, what's the damage bill, but it's often very hard to quantify what the the ongoing effect's going to be to businesses. And we hark back to the Japanese earthquakes that contributed to the Fukushima disaster. That actually had significant impacts on industry. Shut down Sony, shut down Honda, shut down Toyota. So those knock-on effects can be the most significant and the ones that start to affect markets.
There's been quite a number of hurricanes that have hit the US, in the last, 20 years. Yep.
Well, we're looking at 15 major hurricanes since 2001, actually. So quite interestingly, only 4 of them appear at points of inflection, points of change on the stock market. If you remember, there was one Hurricane Ike, and then there was Allison. So Ike was back in 2008, Allison 2001. They were both followed by serious declines, bearing in mind that they were also part of what was going on in the world at the time, if you want to call it a perfect financial storm. Allison was just after the 2000 technology bubble that we had, and obviously very significant global financial crisis, 2007, 2008 for the other ones. So sometimes hard to quantify the impact of the hurricanes. And we also had Irene in 2011, and that was when there was an expected low in our market financially anyway. Looking at all the other ones, they've really just been a blip on the radar in the long term.
Yeah, okay. So then if you combine a natural disaster like Hurricane Irma with what could be happening in North Korea at the moment.
Yes.
You've got all of these different things that are happening. Obviously, that's going to have a long-term or a short-term effect on what the markets are doing.
It's a time to be fairly cautious, Graham. So for investors out there, if you think about the possible negative impact of all the big ticket items, if you like, we've got North Korea. We've now got significant weather events going on causing multiple hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage. And the possibility of the US economy maybe not being as strong as they might like. For example, if Donald Trump doesn't push through tax cuts that were promised back at the election. If all of those things we end up with the wrong 50% outcome of those 3 things, we're going to see fairly significant falls in markets over the next little while.
All right.
So I'm saying be cautious with your portfolios.
All right. One other thing that seems to affect the markets, and I can't understand how this happens, is that whenever there's the release of a new iPhone, the markets go crazy. Well, why?
Oh, they love it. So the expectation is that, the greed factor comes in, the need to get the new technology, and that stampede to get the new iPhone. We've got some numbers here. Obviously, we're seeing the 10th anniversary of the iPhone this year, and they've got 3 new models expected to be released. So it's interesting. Apple, the company, is up about 600% since the release of their first iPhone in January 2007. So they've done very, very, very well out of iPhones and obviously the your iPads, etc. So historically their shares rise in anticipation of the release, but they tend to have declined about 80% of the time on the day the new model is revealed. So it's always the invest in anticipation of an outcome, and then there's a little bit of a pullback. The effect on the market can be fairly significant because Apple, it's part of the US NASDAQ index. It's actually 17% of that index, that company alone. One of the 6 top companies that make up 40% of the NASDAQ. So it does move the market. when it does these things. So, we'll see it bounce around a little bit over the next week.
Yeah, when's it officially launched? I think it's on Thursday.
Next day or two, yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
Well, we'll just keep an eye on that and see. But your
Steve
advice,
will report on that.
And your advice to, and the advice you'd be giving to your clients at the moment is a little bit of caution, eh?
Absolutely. We know that there's some fairly significant geopolitical and financial concerns around in the world at the moment. So those things could be fine. But at the same time, fear tends to concern markets. We talked a couple of weeks ago about that fear index, and it's still fairly high. The VIX, if you remember us talking about that. Mm-hmm. So those things are still fairly high. So there is a possibility of all things going wrong at once. I'm saying be cautious with your investment portfolios because of that.
All right. Apart from all that, we've got legislation going into the British Parliament as we speak to get Brexit going.
Yes,
so
that's right.
That could be another.
It is actually another one that's been permeating along for a while now, since was it about April last year, where when the vote went through. So they've got a little bit more time, but this tends to, I think, it buys the government a bit of time to to get that orderly exit happening. But that could also be a reason to be cautious. If that goes wrong, it has knock-on effects into the rest of Europe.
All right. If you'd like some financial advice as far as your investments are concerned, you can always make an appointment at Retire Invest. Talk to the staff there. Give them a call on 4639 3733. Thank you, Jeff, for coming in. Do appreciate it. It's 1:45.